The town of Red Willow was small, dusty, and quiet, tucked between rolling hills and stretches of dry grass that seemed endless under the golden afternoon sun. The streets were mostly empty, except for the occasional wagon creaking slowly along the dirt road, or a child chasing a stray chicken across the square. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where secrets were hard to keep, and where strangers were noticed the moment they stepped off a horse. On one such quiet afternoon, a cowboy rode into town. He was tall and lean, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, a faded coat that had seen many seasons, and boots that carried the dust of countless trails. His horse, a strong chestnut mare, walked steadily, almost as if she sensed the tension in the town and knew to keep a careful pace. The cowboy, whose name was Luke Carson, had traveled far and wide, taking on odd jobs, helping ranchers, and occasionally delivering messages from one town to another. He had learned to read people, to understand the subtle signs of danger or kindness, but nothing had prepared him for what he would encounter in Red Willow. Luke guided his horse to the town square, where the general store and a small saloon stood side by side. The buildings were simple, wooden structures with paint peeling from the sun and wind. He tied his horse to the hitching post and took a moment to observe. The townspeople were cautious, glancing at him from windows and doorways. Children peeked from behind barrels, their curiosity barely contained. Luke smiled faintly. He had grown used to this. Strangers always caused a stir, and in places like Red Willow, every newcomer had to earn their place. As he walked, he noticed a group of women sitting under the shade of a large oak tree near the edge of the town square. They were known as the Apache sisters, a group of sisters whose reputation traveled faster than any rider on horseback. They were clever, cunning, and often found in situations that left townsfolk whispering in amazement or fear. Some said they had a knack for getting what they wanted without anyone noticing until it was too late. Others claimed they had a network of friends and allies, though no one ever knew for sure. Luke observed them quietly, sensing the sharpness in their eyes and the confidence in their posture. Among the sisters was a young woman named Clara. She was smaller than the others, with quick eyes that missed nothing and a mind that worked faster than most men Luke had met. She noticed the new cowboy immediately, though she said nothing. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if studying him from a distance. Clara had an instinct for reading people, for noticing the faintest hint of a lie or a hidden intention. She had heard stories of wandering cowboys before, some of whom were skilled in trickery or had dangerous pasts. But Luke Carson seemed different. He moved with calm confidence, yet there was a light in his eyes that spoke of experience, honesty, and perhaps a touch of loneliness. Clara decided she would watch him closely. She was curious, not just about him, but about what brought him to Red Willow at this particular time. The town had its own rhythm, its own unspoken rules, and anyone arriving at the wrong moment could either cause trouble or find themselves in trouble. She knew the Apache sisters had been planning something for weeks, something that involved the town in ways no one outside their circle could understand. And somehow, Luke Carson seemed linked to it now, though he didn't know it yet. The cowboy, unaware of the careful scrutiny he was under, walked into the general store. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered. The store smelled of fresh bread, leather, and the faint hint of tobacco smoke lingering from earlier customers. The storekeeper, a round, cheerful man named Sam, looked up and greeted him cautiously. "Afternoon, stranger. You look like you've been on the trail a long while. What brings you to Red Willow?" Sam asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Luke nodded politely. "Afternoon. Just passing through. Looking for work if there's any to be had. Heard this town might need a helping hand or two." Sam raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "Well, we always have something to do, though it depends on what you're good at. Horses, cattle, mending fences, maybe even a bit of town watch if you're handy with observation. Luke smiled faintly. I can handle most things. Just point me in the right direction, and I'll do my best. Meanwhile, outside the store, Clara watched. She noticed how Luke interacted with the storekeeper, his manner polite but firm, his tone calm but alert. She made a mental note. He was experienced, reliable, and observant, qualities that could be valuable or dangerous depending on his intentions. As Luke stepped back outside, he noticed the Apache sisters still under the oak tree. One of them, the eldest sister named Lila, gave a subtle nod, acknowledging his presence. It was not hostile, but not welcoming either. Luke didn't react, but he sensed the tension, the unspoken challenge in their posture. He realized he had entered a place where everyone watched everyone else, and every move mattered. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the dirt streets. Luke decided to find lodging for the night, and the only option was the small inn at the far end of town. The inn was modest, with a few rooms upstairs and a common area below where travelers could sit by the fire. The innkeeper, a kindly woman named Martha, greeted him warmly. "Evening, stranger. You look like you've had a long day," Martha said, guiding him to a room. "You can rest here. Dinner's soon if you want." "The town can be a bit quiet at night, but Red Willow has its moments." Luke nodded in thanks, taking a moment to set down his bag and look out the window. From his vantage point, he could see the Apache sisters still under the oak tree, their conversation quiet but intense. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could sense a plan forming, a strategy being laid out. Something told him that the quiet town of Red Willow was about to become very interesting. As he prepared for the night, Luke reflected on the day's events. He had expected a simple stopover, perhaps a night's rest and some work in the morning. Instead, he had stumbled into a place of subtle intrigue, where every glance carried meaning and every action had consequences. He didn't yet know it, but his path was now intertwined with Clara and the Apache sisters. The town, with its dusty streets and quiet corners, held secrets that could change lives, and Luke Carson was about to discover them firsthand. Meanwhile, Clara returned to her room, her mind racing. She thought about the new cowboy, about his calm demeanor and watchful eyes. She considered her next move carefully. If she could learn what the sisters planned, she might be able to protect the town, or at least prepare for what was coming. She smiled faintly, knowing that the game had begun, and the night would be her ally. As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Red Willow seemed peaceful, almost sleepy. But underneath that calm exterior, a silent battle of observation and strategy was underway. One stranger, one group of clever sisters, and one sharp-witted young woman, Clara, were about to set the stage for a story that no one in Red Willow would ever forget. Luke lay down that night, the sounds of the town settling around him, the soft snorts of horses, the occasional creak of a sign in the wind, and the quiet murmurs of the Apache sisters in the distance filled the night air. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the day, but also a spark of anticipation. Something told him that Red Willow, for all its quiet charm, was going to challenge him in ways he had never imagined. And somewhere nearby, Clara, wide awake, was already planning her next move, ready to step into a game of wits and courage that would test everyone involved. The next morning, Red Willow awoke slowly under the pale golden light of sunrise. Dust floated in the air as the townspeople began their day, sweeping porches, tending to horses, and calling out greetings to neighbors. The town square, which had seemed so quiet the previous day, now hummed with subtle activity. Vendors set up stalls, a blacksmith's hammer rang against iron, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee drifted from the small bakery. Clara, the sharp-witted young woman of the Apache sisters, moved through the streets with purpose. She wore a plain dress, simple shoes, and her hair tied back neatly. Her appearance suggested she was just another townswoman, blending in perfectly. But her eyes, bright and calculating, missed nothing. She had spent years learning to read people, to notice small gestures and hints that others overlooked. Today, she had a plan. She intended to learn exactly what her sisters were planning, and she would do it without anyone realizing. She had overheard fragments of conversation the previous evening, whispers under the oak tree that hinted at a new scheme. The sisters' plan was clever, but Clara needed more details. She needed to understand their full intentions before it could cause trouble. And so, she decided to use a trick she had mastered over time, pretending to be asleep at the right moment. It was risky, but it was the only way to hear everything without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, Luke Carson had breakfast at the inn. He was quiet, thoughtful, sipping his coffee while glancing out the window at the streets below. Something about Red Willow felt alive in a way he had not expected. The town might have appeared small and calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension, of secrets and plans that shifted beneath the surface. He had noticed the group of women under the oak tree again that morning, the same sisters who had intrigued him the day before. They moved with confidence and precision, speaking in hushed tones and gesturing subtly. Luke couldn't hear their words, but he sensed that they were up to something important. After finishing breakfast, Luke decided to take a walk through the town to stretch his legs and get a better sense of the place. As he wandered, he noticed Clara moving quietly among the townspeople, observing everything with careful attention. Her eyes met his briefly, and she gave him a small nod, not out of friendliness, but as a silent acknowledgement that she had seen him. Luke's curiosity was piqued. There was something different about her, something clever and alert. He couldn't yet put his finger on it, but he knew she was someone who noticed more than she let on. As the day went on, Clara positioned herself strategically near the Apache sisters' usual meeting spot. She pretended to perform ordinary tasks, tidying a nearby stall, arranging flowers, or pausing to rest on a bench. But all the while, her mind was focused on listening, observing, and understanding. The sisters arrived one by one, laughing softly, their voices low enough to avoid being overheard by ordinary passers-by. Clara waited patiently, her body relaxed, her head tilted slightly as if resting. To anyone watching, she appeared calm, unremarkable, and perfectly at ease. Once the sisters settled into conversation, Clara began her trick. She leaned back against the bench, closed her eyes, and let her breathing become slow and steady. To an outside observer, it would seem she had fallen asleep, but in truth, she was fully alert. She could hear every word, catch every subtle inflection in their voices, and notice each small gesture that might hint at their intentions. It was a delicate balancing act, appear completely relaxed while absorbing every detail. The Apache sisters discussed plans that involved the town's market, the movement of goods, and a subtle strategy to ensure their influence grew without anyone noticing. Clara's sharp mind pieced together each part of the plan as it was spoken. She realized that the sisters were not malicious. They did not intend harm, but their actions could cause confusion and challenges for the townspeople if left unchecked. She made mental notes, remembering which details were important and which could be ignored. From her vantage point, Clara noticed Luke Carson walking down the street. He paused near the general store, glancing toward the bench where she rested. There was a faint hint of curiosity in his eyes, and Clara could sense that he was beginning to wonder what she was doing. She maintained her calm, slow breathing, careful not to give anything away. Luke lingered for a moment, observing the subtle tension in the air, then moved on. Clara knew that her plan depended on secrecy, and she could not risk being discovered. Hours passed, and the sisters continued their conversation, unaware that Clara was listening. She heard details about timing, locations, and small favors that would be requested from the townspeople. It became clear that the sisters' plan was clever but complicated, involving careful coordination to avoid mistakes. Clara's mind worked quickly, forming strategies in case anything went wrong. She had to stay patient, gather information, and ensure that she fully understood their intentions before acting. Luke, meanwhile, went about his day in the town, helping with small chores, assisting with horses, and speaking politely with the townspeople. He kept a watchful eye, noticing unusual interactions and gestures. There was something happening in Red Willow that required caution and attention, though he did not yet know the full story. Every so often he glanced toward the bench where Clara rested, sensing that she was observing something important. He did not understand her role yet, but he could feel that she was not an ordinary townswoman. By late afternoon, Clara had gathered enough information to form a clear picture of the sisters' intentions. She knew the order in which tasks would be completed, who would be involved, and the potential outcomes of their plan. Her heart raced, but she maintained her calm appearance. Slowly, she shifted her position, stretching slightly, and opened her eyes as if waking from a short nap. To any casual observer, it would appear that she had simply been resting in the warm sunlight. The sisters eventually concluded their meeting, laughing softly and leaving with light footsteps. Clara waited a few moments before following at a discreet distance. She needed to ensure that no detail was missed, that every movement aligned with the plan she had overheard. She moved quietly through the streets, blending into the townspeople, her mind analyzing, remembering, and preparing for what might come next. Later, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Clara found a quiet spot to reflect on what she had learned. She realized that the sisters' plan, while harmless in intent, could create confusion and inconvenience for the town. She considered the best way to intervene, to ensure the town remained safe and orderly without revealing her strategy. It was a delicate task, requiring patience, intelligence, and careful timing. Clara smiled faintly, knowing that her plan was already in motion, even if others were unaware. Luke returned to the inn as evening approached, tired from the day's activities, but alert and thoughtful. He reflected on the brief glimpses he had had of the sisters' interactions, and of Clara's mysterious behavior. Something about the way she had been positioned, the calm and observant manner, made him pause. He sensed that she had been part of something important, though he could not yet see the full picture. The quiet town of Red Willow was full of surprises, and he realized that he was just beginning to understand the depth of its hidden dynamics. As night fell, the town settled into silence. The streets were empty, except for the occasional horse returning to its stable or the faint creak of a swinging sign in the wind. Clara returned home, her mind still active, replaying each detail she had overheard. She knew that tomorrow would require careful observation and clever planning. She could not reveal her knowledge yet, not until the right moment presented itself. Patience was her ally, and strategy her strongest weapon. Luke lay in his room at the inn, listening to the sounds of the town. Somewhere in the shadows, Clara had been watching, listening, and planning. He did not yet know the full extent of her actions, but a part of him sensed that she was both clever and daring, someone who would shape the events of Red Willow in ways no one could predict. He felt a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and cautious respect, wondering how this quiet, clever woman would influence the days to come. The night deepened, and Red Willow seemed peaceful once again. But beneath the calm surface, a quiet game of observation and intelligence was underway. One young woman, sharp and cunning, had already set her plan in motion. One cowboy, observant and thoughtful, was beginning to notice subtle patterns and signals in the town. And the Apache sisters, unaware of Clara's careful listening, moved through their own plans, confident in their cleverness. By the time the first stars appeared in the night sky, Clara had positioned herself for the next phase of her plan. She would continue to gather information, carefully balancing secrecy and observation. Luke, too, would remain watchful, drawn unknowingly into the unfolding story. And Red Willow, with its quiet streets, dusty squares, and hidden tensions, would soon experience the subtle and clever actions of those who moved with intelligence, courage, and determination. The morning in Red Willow began quietly, with the soft pink glow of sunrise spilling across the dusty streets. Birds chirped from the wooden rooftops, and the occasional clatter of hooves echoed as a rider passed through town. But beneath the calm, a sense of anticipation lingered. Clara, ever alert and observant, had spent the night reviewing everything she had learned from the previous day. She knew that the Apache sisters' plan was clever and complicated, and she also knew that her own understanding of it could make all the difference in how events unfolded. Clara moved carefully through the streets, her steps measured and her eyes sharp. Today, she would take a more active role in observing the sisters, ensuring she didn't miss any detail. She wore her usual plain dress, her hair tied back, and carried a small satchel with a few necessities. To anyone passing by, she seemed like an ordinary townswoman, but inside, her mind raced with strategies and possibilities. Every glance from a passerby, every word she overheard, and every subtle movement of the sisters would be noted and analyzed. Meanwhile, Luke Carson had already begun his day. He walked through the town with a sense of curiosity and caution. His eyes roamed over the streets, noting how the townspeople moved and interacted. He had begun to suspect that something more than ordinary was happening in Red Willow. The brief glimpses of the Apache sisters, combined with Clara's unusual behavior, told him that there were hidden currents in this town. He felt a growing fascination with Clara, sensing that she was not only clever, but also brave in ways he could barely guess. As the morning wore on, Clara positioned herself near the usual meeting place of the Apache sisters. This time, she did not need to pretend to sleep immediately. Instead, she casually moved through the marketplace, appearing to inspect vegetables and goods while keeping the sisters in her peripheral vision. Her mind was constantly at work, piecing together the fragments of conversation she had overheard the previous day and listening for new information. The sisters gathered beneath the large oak tree once again, their laughter soft, but filled with purpose. Lila, the eldest sister, seemed to take charge, speaking with a quiet authority. Clara observed every gesture, every subtle nod, and every exchange of glances. She realized that the sisters were discussing a delicate sequence of actions that would influence the townspeople without anyone realizing their role in it. It was subtle, clever, and required precise timing. Clara knew that understanding the details could allow her to prevent potential confusion or trouble. At a key moment, Clara leaned back against a nearby wall, closed her eyes, and began her carefully practiced act of pretending to sleep. Her breathing slowed, her body relaxed, and she allowed herself to appear completely unaware. Yet every sense remained alert. She could hear the sisters' conversation clearly, catch the faintest shift in tone, and notice every movement. It was a balancing act of perception and deception, requiring patience and precision. From her hidden vantage point, Clara heard Lila explain the first steps of the sisters' plan. It involved subtle requests to the townspeople, adjustments in the marketplace, and small actions designed to influence the flow of goods and interactions. The plan was harmless in intention but complex in execution, and any mistakes could create unnecessary confusion. Clara's mind raced as she noted each step, forming a complete picture of how the scheme would unfold. Luke, meanwhile, had noticed Clara's behavior. He paused near the general store, observing her with a mix of curiosity and astonishment. There was something extraordinary about the way she carried herself, about the calm focus in her posture even while appearing relaxed. He realized slowly and with growing admiration, that Clara was not simply a young woman blending into the town. She was actively gathering information, observing the sisters, and planning her next move. Luke's attention remained fixed on her as she pretended to sleep. He wondered how she could manage such a feat without being noticed. The skill, the courage, and the sharp mind required for such observation impressed him more than he expected. He had encountered clever people before, but few displayed such daring and intelligence without drawing attention. Luke felt a mix of respect and astonishment, realizing that he was witnessing a display of ingenuity and bravery unlike anything he had seen. As the day wore on, Clara continued her act, listening to every detail. The sisters discussed the timing of their actions, the sequence in which they would approach the townspeople, and how to handle potential challenges. Clara's mind absorbed every word, organizing the information into a clear understanding of their plan. She knew that acting too soon could expose her intentions, so she remained patient, letting the sisters reveal everything in their own time. Finally, a subtle shift in the conversation indicated that the sisters were moving toward the execution of their plan. Clara slowly opened one eye, pretending to stretch as if awakening from a brief rest. She noted the exact moment when the sisters would begin their first actions, committing it to memory with precision. Every gesture, every glance, and every instruction had been recorded in her mind, forming a complete picture of what was about to unfold. Luke, observing from a distance, was stunned. He could see that Clara had not only understood the sisters' plan, but had done so without their knowledge. The level of skill required to remain unnoticed while gathering such detailed information amazed him. He felt a mixture of admiration, surprise, and respect, realizing that she was far more capable than he had initially assumed. Clara's intelligence and courage left a lasting impression on him, and he began to understand that she would play a key role in the days to come. Clara followed the sisters at a discreet distance as they moved through the town, carrying out the first steps of their plan. She observed their interactions with the townspeople, noting how each subtle request and adjustment influenced the flow of activities. Her mind worked quickly, considering the best way to intervene if anything went awry. She did not intend to stop the sisters entirely. Their plan was harmless, but she wanted to ensure that the town remained orderly and that no one was confused or inconvenienced. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Clara carefully maneuvered through the marketplace, positioning herself to observe the sisters while remaining unnoticed. She noticed the way townspeople responded to the sisters' actions, how small adjustments in gestures and words guided their behavior. It was a fascinating display of subtle influence, and Clara's mind worked to predict the next steps. She felt a growing sense of confidence, knowing that she had both the information and the skill to ensure a smooth outcome. Luke, who had followed at a distance, continued to be astonished. Every observation he made reinforced his impression of Clara as clever, daring, and perceptive. He realized that her actions required not only intelligence, but also courage. The courage to act discreetly, to remain calm under observation, and to anticipate the movements of others. He felt a growing admiration for her, understanding that she was a remarkable individual whose skills could shape events in ways few could imagine. By late afternoon, Clara had gathered everything she needed. She knew the sisters' plan in its entirety, from the first steps to the final outcome. Her mind worked to consider potential challenges, adjustments, and ways to guide events toward a smooth resolution. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her careful observation had provided her with the insight necessary to act effectively when the time came. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Clara returned to a quiet corner of the town, her mind still active with strategy and planning. She reviewed the events of the day, recalling every detail of the sisters' actions and intentions. She knew that tomorrow would require careful timing, subtlety, and precise execution. Her patience and intelligence had positioned her to influence events without drawing attention, and she felt a quiet sense of readiness. Luke returned to the inn that evening, thoughtful and impressed. He reflected on what he had observed, both of Clara's cleverness and the sisters' plan. He realized that Red Willow, beneath its calm exterior, was a place of subtle strategy and hidden skill. He felt a sense of anticipation for what was to come, knowing that he had already witnessed something extraordinary. Clara's courage, intelligence, and careful observation had left a deep impression on him, and he understood that she would play a central role in the unfolding events. As night fell, the town settled into silence. The streets were quiet, and the stars began to shine above the rooftops. Clara prepared for the next day, reviewing her observations and planning her next moves. She knew that the sisters' plan would continue and that careful attention and subtle guidance would be required to ensure a positive outcome. She felt a sense of purpose, understanding that her skill, patience, and intelligence were essential in shaping the events of Red Willow. Luke lay in his room, reflecting on the day's events. He thought of Clara, of her cleverness and bravery, and of the subtle game of observation she had played. He felt both admiration and curiosity, eager to see how the story would unfold. Red Willow, with its quiet streets and hidden tensions, had revealed a layer of complexity and skill that he had not anticipated. He knew that the coming days would test both courage and intelligence, and that Clara's actions would be at the heart of the unfolding story. The night deepened, and Red Willow remained calm, though the air carried a sense of anticipation. Clara had learned the sisters' intentions, Luke had witnessed her cleverness, and the town lay on the brink of subtle yet significant events. The quiet game of observation, strategy, and courage had set the stage for what was to come, a story of intelligence, bravery, and the remarkable ways in which one clever woman could influence the world around her. The next morning in Red Willow began with a soft, golden light that spilled across the dusty streets, illuminating the wooden buildings and the quiet town square. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of hay and freshly baked bread. Clara rose early, her mind already focused on the events ahead. The previous day had given her a clear understanding of the Apache sisters' plan, and now it was time to think carefully about how to guide the outcome toward a smooth and harmless resolution. She knew that subtlety, strategy, and timing would be crucial. Clara dressed simply, as always, and carried a small notebook hidden in her satchel. She had begun to jot down small notes the night before, capturing details she could use to anticipate each step of the sisters' plan. The notebook was a private record of observations, ideas, and strategies, something no one else in the town could glimpse. As she walked through the streets toward the marketplace, she reviewed the plan in her mind. She needed to be precise, patient, and discreet. Any misstep could alert the sisters, and she could not risk that. Meanwhile, Luke Carson had also risen early. The cowboy was accustomed to moving quickly and observing carefully, skills honed over years on the trail. He had spent the previous days noting the subtle interactions of the townspeople and the Apache sisters, and he had begun to understand that Clara was central to what was unfolding. He was both curious and impressed, realizing that she had courage, intelligence, and a remarkable sense of timing. Today he intended to offer his help, but cautiously, knowing that trust had to be earned. Clara arrived near the oak tree where the sisters often gathered, positioning herself discreetly on a nearby bench. From this vantage point, she could observe without being noticed, blending into the surroundings as ordinary townspeople passed by. She noticed the sisters arriving one by one, their laughter light but filled with purpose. Lila, the eldest, spoke with quiet authority, while the others followed her lead, each movement carefully choreographed. Clara listened, noting both the spoken words and the subtle gestures that revealed the sisters' intentions. Luke wandered through the market, giving the appearance of tending to his own affairs, while keeping a careful eye on Clara. He had noticed the quiet intelligence in her movements, the way she observed without being obvious. He realized that she had been following the sisters' plan for more than a day, and that she had done so without drawing attention. Luke felt a growing respect for her, knowing that few people possessed both the courage and skill to act so cleverly and discreetly. By late morning, Clara had enough information to anticipate the sisters' next moves. She decided it was time to act, though carefully. She would not confront them directly, for that could alert the sisters and complicate the plan. Instead, she would influence events subtly, guiding the sisters' actions and ensuring that the townspeople were prepared for any unexpected outcomes. It was a delicate balance, requiring intelligence, observation, and precise timing. Clara approached Luke quietly, finding him near the general store. She explained in simple terms what she had learned about the sisters' plan, carefully avoiding any words that might reveal her full intentions to casual listeners. Luke listened intently, astonished by the clarity and depth of her understanding. He realized that her observations were accurate and that her insights could help prevent confusion or trouble in the town. Together, they began to discuss how to prepare, how to intervene subtly, and how to guide events without confrontation. Their strategy focused on a few key principles: observation, timing, and discretion. Clara would continue to monitor the sisters, noting every movement and word, while Luke would assist by providing a discreet presence in the marketplace. They would subtly influence the flow of the town, ensuring that the sisters' plan unfolded without mistakes or unintended consequences. Every action had to be calculated, every movement carefully considered. It was a plan that required patience, intelligence, and trust between the two of them. As the day progressed, Clara and Luke moved through the town together, though not openly side by side. They positioned themselves strategically, blending into the crowd while observing the Apache sisters' activities. Clara noted how the sisters interacted with the townspeople, adjusting their actions based on subtle responses and cues. Luke, following her guidance, provided support in small but important ways, moving objects subtly, redirecting attention when necessary, and ensuring that the townspeople were prepared for the sisters' plan without knowing it. The sisters' plan involved several delicate steps: coordinating small purchases, asking for favors, and influencing interactions among the townspeople. Clara watched carefully, noting every detail and predicting the next moves. Luke marveled at her precision and calmness under pressure. She seemed to anticipate the sisters' actions before they even occurred, guiding the town's events quietly and effectively. It was a display of intelligence, patience, and courage that left Luke increasingly impressed. By mid-afternoon, the sisters were fully engaged in their plan. Clara remained close enough to observe, yet far enough to remain unnoticed. She noticed small complications beginning to arise, misunderstandings among the townspeople, minor hesitations, and delays in the sisters' coordination. Using the strategies she and Luke had discussed, Clara intervened subtly. A gentle word here, a small gesture there, ensured that events continued smoothly without revealing her role. Every action was calculated, every movement precise. Luke, observing from a distance, was stunned by Clara's skill. He realized that her intelligence and bravery had shaped the unfolding events in ways he could not have anticipated. She had not only understood the sisters' plan, but had also guided it toward a safe and successful outcome without anyone realizing her involvement. Luke felt a deep respect for her, recognizing that her abilities were extraordinary and her courage remarkable. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Clara and Luke continued their careful guidance. The sisters, unaware of the intervention, moved through the final steps of their plan. Clara's observations ensured that minor mistakes were corrected quickly, that misunderstandings were smoothed over, and that the town remained orderly. Luke assisted quietly, providing support where needed, impressed by the subtlety and effectiveness of Clara's leadership. By early evening, the sisters concluded their activities, satisfied with the results. They left the town square, laughing softly and congratulating one another, unaware that their plan had been influenced and guided by Clara's careful observations. Clara watched them leave, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had managed to protect the town, ensure the plan proceeded smoothly, and maintain secrecy, all without confrontation or conflict. Luke approached her as the sisters disappeared from view. "I don't know how you did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. "You understood everything, anticipated every move, and guided it all without them realizing. I've never seen anything like it." Clara smiled faintly, a mixture of satisfaction and modesty. "It wasn't easy," she replied. "But patience, observation, and careful planning make all the difference. I just had to be ready and trust what I had learned." Luke nodded, still amazed. He realized that Clara's skill was not only remarkable, but essential in a town like Red Willow. Her intelligence, courage, and careful planning had ensured a smooth outcome, preventing confusion and potential trouble. He felt a growing respect for her, understanding that she was not only clever but also brave and capable in ways that few could match. As evening settled over Red Willow, the town appeared calm once again. The marketplace was quiet, the streets empty, and the air filled with the soft sounds of the wind and the distant call of a night bird. Clara and Luke walked together briefly, discussing the day's events and reviewing the plan for the next steps. They understood that their work was not yet complete, but they felt confident that they had managed the situation with skill and care. The night deepened, and the town settled into a peaceful silence. Clara returned home, her mind active with reflections and strategies. She reviewed the details of the sisters' plan, the interventions she had made, and the outcomes that had unfolded. She felt a quiet sense of pride and satisfaction, knowing that her careful observation, intelligence, and courage had ensured a smooth and successful resolution. Luke, too, retired for the night, his thoughts filled with admiration for Clara. He reflected on the subtle strategies, the careful planning, and the intelligence she had displayed. He realized that Red Willow, with its quiet streets and hidden dynamics, was a place where courage and intelligence could make all the difference. Clara's actions had proven that observation, strategy, and careful timing could guide events without confrontation, leaving a lasting impression on both the town and on him. As the stars appeared in the sky, Clara prepared for the next day, knowing that the story of Red Willow was far from over. The Apache sisters, though clever and confident, would continue their activities, and careful observation and guidance would remain essential. Clara felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in her intelligence, courage, and ability to influence events quietly and effectively. Luke, watching the town from his window, felt a quiet excitement. He had witnessed something extraordinary, something that required both skill and bravery. He knew that Clara would continue to play a central role in the unfolding events, and that her cleverness and courage would shape the story of Red Willow in ways he could only begin to imagine.